My boyfriend's wealthy parents ignored their grumpy old gardener, who was struggling right in front of them. I, on the other hand, stopped to help him. I had no idea the family's powerful, intimidating matriarch was watching the entire exchange from an upstairs window. Later that day, when she finally introduced me to her reclusive, billionaire husband, he already knew me. Before we get to that intimidating garden party, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more new stories every single day. Okay, let's get back to that long and stressful car ride. The drive to the Prescott family estate felt like a journey to another planet. With each passing mile, the familiar, comfortable landscape of my own world was replaced by the rolling, manicured hills and imposing stone gates of theirs. I sat in the passenger seat of my boyfriend Jacob's car, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, a knot of pure anxiety tightening in my stomach. Today was the day I would finally meet his family, and from what Jacob had told me, it was less a social call and more a final judgment. "Okay, just remember the key players," he said, his own voice tight with a nervous energy I had never heard from him before. He was rehearsing the details with me for the third time. "My father, Philip, will talk about business. Just nod and try to look interested. My mother, Isabel, will ask you about your family. Be vague. And then there's my grandmother, Vivian." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "She's the one you have to win over. She's the true head of the family. She's intense. She barely speaks, but she sees everything. Just be polite, be respectful, and whatever you do, don't show any weakness." "Weakness?" I asked. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know," he said, exasperated. "Just try to be perfect, okay? For me?" I loved Jacob, but I hated this. I hated being made to feel like I had to audition for the right to be with him. I was a good person. I had a good job as a pediatric nurse. I was kind. But in their world, the world of the Prescotts, my value was apparently to be measured by a completely different and much colder set of metrics. We finally turned on to the long, private road that led to the estate. The house itself was breathtaking, a sprawling stone manor that looked like it had been plucked from the English countryside. As we pulled up the circular gravel driveway, my anxiety reached a peach pitch. And that's when I saw him. He was an old man, dressed in muddy, worn-out overalls and a faded cap, kneeling by a magnificent bed of prize-winning roses that lined the grand entrance. He was struggling with a large, heavy wheelbarrow, its single wheel stuck in the soft earth. His face was weathered and deeply wrinkled, and he was grunting with the effort, his old back straining. He was clearly the estate's gardener. Just as we were about to get out of the car, the grand, imposing front doors of the mansion opened, and Jacob's parents, Philip and Isabel, stepped out onto the porch to greet us. They were the very picture of casual, old-money elegance. They saw the old gardener struggling not 20 feet away from them. Philip just gave a small, annoyed shake of his head. Honestly, the quality of the staff they hire these days is just appalling. Then they turned their attention to us, walking right past the struggling old man without a second glance. Their greeting to Jacob was warm and effusive. Their greeting to me was a performance of polite but distinctly chilly appraisal. "So, you must be Nora," she said, her eyes doing a swift, expert scan of my simple but respectable dress. But I was only half listening. My attention was fixed on the old man, who was still fighting a losing battle with the wheelbarrow. The sight of their casual, callous dismissal of his struggle, of his very existence, sparked something in me. A quiet, defiant anger. "Excuse me for just a moment," I said, my voice polite but firm, cutting my future mother-in-law off mid-sentence. Before anyone could react, I walked off the grand porch, across the perfect lawn, and over to the struggling gardener. "That looks heavy," I said with a warm smile. "Would you like a hand?" The old man looked up at me, his eyes a startlingly intelligent and piercing shade of blue, wide with surprise. "Oh, no, miss," he grunted, his face red with the effort. "You'll ruin your nice dress." "Nonsense," I said. "A dress can be cleaned." I took hold of the other handle of the wheelbarrow. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Together, we gave a mighty heave, and the wheel finally came free from the mud with a soft, sucking sound. We pushed it the final few feet to the edge of the rose garden. "Thank you, young lady," he said, breathing heavily, leaning against his wheelbarrow. "That was very kind of you. You didn't have to do that." "Everyone needs a helping hand sometimes," I said simply. From the corner of my eye, I could see my audience on the porch, frozen in a state of horrified disbelief. I had broken every rule of their world. I had ignored the hosts, delayed the formal greeting, and was now fraternizing with, and getting dirt on my dress, from the hired help. I gave the old man one last smile and turned to walk back to the porch, to face my judgment. I could see the look of pure, unadulterated disdain on Isabel's face as her eyes fixed on the small but undeniable smear of mud on the sleeve of my dress. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with an icy, condescending sweetness as I approached. "It seems you've found your level here already. How rustic." Jacob looked mortified, his face pale. I felt a flash of hot anger, but I held my head high. They looked at the mud on my dress as if it were a permanent stain on their family's honor. They thought they had just seen the final damning proof of my unsuitability. They had no idea that the mud on my dress was the very thing that was about to make me the most powerful and most welcome person at their entire party. I stood on the grand, slate-tiled porch, the icy disdain of my boyfriend's mother, Isabel, washing over me. Her words, "How rustic," hung in the air, a perfect, polished little barb designed to remind me of my place. My face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. I looked at Jacob, my boyfriend, and saw a reflection of my own pain in his mortified expression. He opened his mouth to defend me, but I gave him a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. "Not now," my eye said. "Not yet." "I am so sorry, Nora," he whispered as his parents turned their backs on me and glided into the house to greet more important guests. "She shouldn't have said that. She can be intense," I finished for him, managing a weak smile. "You warned me." "It's not right," he insisted, his hand finding mine. "Let's just leave. We don't have to do this." I looked past him into the grand, sunlit garden where the party was in full swing. I saw dozens of people in expensive linen suits and floral dresses, all laughing and sipping champagne. Leaving now would be a retreat. It would be a confirmation of what his parents already believed, that I didn't belong here, that I was not strong enough for their world. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "We're not leaving. I'm not going to let them chase me away." I took a deep breath. "I'm here for you, not for them." He squeezed my hand, his eyes full of a grateful, loving relief, and together we stepped into the lion's den. The party was a masterpiece of casual, old-money elegance. A string quartet played softly on the main lawn. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, carrying silver trays of champagne and impossibly delicate hors d'oeuvres. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the thousands of prize-winning roses that my mother-in-law, that Isabel, was so famous for. It was beautiful, but it was a cold, performative beauty. It was a stage, and everyone was playing a part. For the next hour, I was a ghost at Jacob's side. His parents, Philip and Isabel, made a great show of introducing me to their friends, but each introduction was a carefully crafted insult. "This is Jacob's new friend, Nora," Isabel would say, her emphasis on the word friend, a clear dismissal of our relationship's seriousness. "She's a pediatric nurse. Such noble work, isn't it?" She would add, her tone implying that my career was a quaint but ultimately insignificant charity project. I would just smile, shake hands, and endure the appraising, curious glances of their friends. Through it all, from the corner of my eye, I would occasionally see him, the gardener, Theodore. He was not mingling. He was working, a solitary, focused figure in the distance, quietly tending to a remote corner of the vast garden, his movements slow, deliberate, and full of a quiet, powerful purpose. He seemed to exist in a completely different universe from the frivolous, chattering world of the party guests. He was the only other real person here, I thought. Jacob, to his credit, tried his best. He stayed by my side, his hand a constant, reassuring presence on my back. He would try to steer conversations towards topics he knew I was passionate about: art, literature, my recent volunteer trip. But his parents were masters of the social battlefield, and they would definitely redirect every conversation back to their own preferred topics: the stock market, their recent trip to Europe, the outrageous cost of maintaining a property of this size. I found myself in a conversation with Jacob's father, Philip, a man who seemed to measure the worth of every human being by their net worth. "So, Nora," he said, looking at me over the top of his champagne flute, "Jacob tells me you live in the city. A small apartment, I imagine. It must be so difficult. The noise, the crime. We believe in providing our children with space to breathe." Before I could reply, Jacob jumped in. "Dad, Nora's apartment is beautiful. But I put a gentle hand on his arm, stopping him. The silent sacrifice. I would not let them turn me into a source of conflict between Jacob and his parents. I gave Philip a polite, serene smile. It's small, but it's home, and I love it. My refusal to be baited, my quiet refusal to be ashamed of my own life, seemed to confuse and irritate them more than any argument could. The energy of the party shifted suddenly, a palpable change in the atmosphere, like a drop in barometric pressure. A hush fell over the crowd. I looked towards the main terrace, and I saw her, the matriarch, Vivian. She was even more formidable than Jacob had described. Tall and impossibly elegant, with a mane of snow-white hair swept up in a perfect chignon, she stood at the top of the terrace steps, surveying the party with the cool, appraising gaze of a queen. The crowd parted for her as she began her slow, regal descent into the garden. Philip and Isabel, who had been the self-important hosts just moments before, now rushed to their mother's side, their expressions shifting from arrogant confidence to a fawning, almost childlike deference. This was the true center of power. She moved through the party, a ship of state sailing through a sea of smaller vessels, offering a brief, polite word here, a cool, regal nod there. And with every step she took, she was getting closer to us. Jacob tensed beside me. "Okay," he whispered, his voice tight. "This is it. Just be polite. Don't say too much. Let her lead." She finally reached our small corner of the garden. Her children, my would-be in-laws, hovered beside her. "Mother," Isabel said, her voice a little too bright, a desperate attempt to control the narrative, "I'd like you to finally meet Jacob's friend. This is Nora." Vivian Prescott turned her full, undivided attention to me. Her eyes, as sharp and as piercingly blue as a hawk's, did a slow, methodical sweep. They took in my simple dress, my nervous but polite smile, my anxious boyfriend at my side. And then, her gaze stopped. It fixed with an unnerving, analytical intensity on the small, faint, but undeniable smudge of dirt on the sleeve of my dress, the last remaining evidence of my encounter with the gardener. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Jacob's parents had seen that smudge and had instantly judged me and found me wanting. Now, the true matriarch, the final and most important judge in this silent, brutal trial, was looking at the very same piece of evidence. And as I stood there, pinned by her intelligent, unreadable gaze, I had no idea if her verdict would be my salvation or my final, absolute, and unforgiving ruin. I stood there, on the perfectly manicured lawn, a defendant in a silent trial, pinned by the sharp, intelligent gaze of the family's Chief Justice, Vivian Prescott. The smudge of mud on my dress, which had been a mark of shame in her daughter's eyes, was now Exhibit A. My boyfriend, Jacob, took a half step forward, his mouth opening, ready to launch into a frantic, apologetic explanation on my behalf. His mother, Isabel, looked on with a smug, satisfied smirk, certain that her mother was about to deliver the final, damning verdict on my unsuitability. Vivian raised a single, elegant hand, a gesture that was not dramatic, but held an undeniable weight of command. Jacob's mouth snapped shut. Isabel's smirk faltered. The matriarch was in session, and she would not be interrupted. Her hawk-like eyes remained on me, but her voice when she spoke was not the cold, cutting tone of her children. It was a calm, clear, and dangerously neutral sound. "That is a lovely dress, my dear. It seems to have met with some misfortune. Tell me what happened." It was a test. I knew it in my bones. It was not a casual question. She was giving me the chance to lie, to make an excuse, to blame a clumsy misstep. She was testing my integrity. "Mother, she just arrived." Isabel jumped in, her voice a little too bright, a desperate attempt to control the narrative. "She just had a clumsy moment outside, that's all. Nora, you really should have gone inside to freshen up before greeting everyone." Vivian turned her slow and fixed her daughter with a look so cold it could have frozen fire. "I was not speaking to you, Isabel," she said, her voice dropping a full octave. "I was speaking to Ms." She turned her gaze back to me, her eyebrows raised in a silent, expectant query. "My name is Nora, ma'am," I said, my voice quiet but steady. The moment of truth was here. I would not lie for them. I would not cower. And it wasn't a clumsy moment. I was helping your gardener. His wheelbarrow was stuck in the mud down by the rose bushes. The words hung in the air. I saw a flash of pure, horrified mortification on Isabel's face. I had just confessed, in front of the family matriarch, to kneeling in the dirt with the hired help. To her, this was a social crime of the highest order. But Vivian's expression was unreadable. "The gardener?" she said, her tone still neutral. "You mean Theodore?" The fact that she knew his name, that he was not just an anonymous servant to her, was the first subtle clue that the ground beneath my feet was not as unstable as I thought. "Yes," I said, "Theodore. He was struggling." "I see," she said. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes still locked on mine. And then a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of her lips. She finally turned and looked at her own daughter and son-in-law, who were now shifting uncomfortably under her gaze. "How very interesting," she said, her voice now laced with a new, sharp, and deeply ironic amusement. "My husband has been wrestling with that very same wheelbarrow all morning. The back wheel is warped. It is a shame that no one in his own family, the very people who benefit from the profound beauty of this garden, thought to offer him a hand." She looked back at me, and her smile was no longer ironic. It was warm. "But you, a guest, on your very first visit to our home, did. That is very telling." The courtroom had delivered a preliminary verdict, and it was in my favor. The color drained from Isabel's and Philip's faces. They had tried to use my compassion as a weapon against me, and the matriarch had just turned that weapon back on them. They were not just snobs. They had been revealed as unhelpful, unobservant children. Vivian then did something that sent a second, more powerful shockwave through her own family. She stepped forward and took my arm, her touch a gesture of public, undeniable alliance. "Nora," she said, her voice now loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "you are a woman of character. I find that deeply refreshing. Come now, walk with me. I believe it is long past time you were properly introduced to the most important person in this family." She began to lead me away, across the lawn, leaving my stunned boyfriend and his horrified, humiliated parents standing there in her wake. I was in a daze, my mind reeling. I had survived the trial. I had, impossibly, won. And now I was being led to meet the final, mysterious authority figure, the patriarch himself, the husband she spoke of with such reverence. As she guided me across the lawn, I had no idea who this most important person in the family that I was being taken to meet was. I assumed it was some visiting dignitary, some powerful business partner, a final and even more intimidating test. I had no idea she was leading me right back to the grumpy, kind-hearted old man I had just met in the dirt, the man her entire family had so casually and so foolishly ignored. Vivian Prescott's hand on my arm was a brand, a public declaration of her favor that sent a wave of silent, shocked whispers through the garden party. She did not lead me back toward the main terrace, back to the superficial chatter of her high society guests. Instead, she began to guide me across the vast, rolling lawn, away from the party, towards the magnificent, rolling rose gardens at the far end of the estate. I was completely bewildered. Where were we going? Who was this most important person in the family that I was being taken to meet? I could feel the eyes of my boyfriend, Jacob, and his horrified parents, Philip and Isabel, on our backs as they followed us at a stunned, uncertain distance. The further we walked from the main party, the quieter it became. The sound of the string quartet faded, replaced by the gentle buzz of bees and the soft, rustling whisper of the wind in the ancient oak trees. The air here was heavy with the sweet, intoxicating perfume of thousands of roses. It was a world away from the tense, performative atmosphere of the gala. This felt real. This felt like a sanctuary. My mind raced with possibilities. Was her husband a reclusive invalid who stayed in a private cottage in the gardens? Was he some eccentric artist with a studio hidden amongst the flowers? The legend of the Prescott patriarch, Theodore, was that he was even more powerful and even more private than his wife. I braced myself for another, even more intimidating test. And then I saw him. In the center of the most beautiful part of the garden, a circular grove surrounded by a riot of colorful, prize-winning roses, was the gardener. He was on his hands and knees, his back to us, his attention completely focused on the delicate task of tending to the soil around a particularly magnificent deep red rosebush. He was still in his muddy overalls and his worn, faded cap. He seemed to be in his own peaceful, private world, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding just a few yards away. Vivian slowed her pace, a strange, soft, and loving smile on her face as she looked at the old man. I was utterly and completely confused. Why had she brought me here? To show me the gardener? We stopped just at the edge of the rosebed. Jacob and his parents had caught up to us now, and they stood behind us, their faces a canvas of pure, baffled apprehension. "Theodore, my love," Vivian called out, her voice soft but carrying easily in the quiet air. "There is someone I would like you to meet." The old man, the gardener, looked up from his work. He saw his wife, and a warm, genuine smile spread across his tired, wrinkled face. Then he saw me, standing beside her, and his eyes, that same startlingly intelligent shade of blue, twinkled with a familiar, friendly recognition. He slowly, with the groan of old joints, got to his feet, wiping his dirty, soil-caked hands on the sides of his overalls. My boyfriend, Jacob, looked like his brain was about to short-circuit. His parents were pale, their mouths slightly agape as if they were witnessing a scene that defied all the laws of their social universe. Vivian turned her gaze from her husband to me, and then her eyes swept over her own children, a look of profound, theatrical finality on her face. "Nora," she said, her voice ringing with a clear, almost musical authority, "I would like you to properly meet my husband of 60 years, the man who designed and planted every single flower in this garden with his own hands, the man whose hard work is the true foundation of the Prescott family fortune, my husband, Theodore." The world tilted. The final, impossible, and absolutely devastating piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The grumpy, kind-hearted old gardener I had helped, the man my in-laws-to-be had dismissed as an incompetent servant, was the reclusive, legendary, and all-powerful patriarch of the entire family. I watched as the full and catastrophic weight of this revelation crashed down upon Philip and Isabel. Their faces, which had been masks of confusion, now crumbled into a look of pure, abject horror. They had not just been rude to a member of their staff in front of a guest, they had shown a callous, contemptuous disdain for their own father, in front of the new girlfriend they were supposed to be judging. They had failed his secret test in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. Theodore ignored his stunned, horrified children completely. He walked directly to me, his dirty hand extended, a warm, genuine smile on his face. "Nora," he said, his voice the same kind, raspy voice from before. "It is a genuine pleasure to properly meet you. My wife has told me for years that our children have become so obsessed with the fruits of my labor that they have forgotten the value of the labor itself." He looked at me, his blue eyes twinkling. "Thank you," he said, "for proving that at least one person in this new generation hasn't forgotten what it's like to get their hands a little dirty for the sake of another." I took his hand, my own hand still slightly grimy from the wheelbarrow, and shook it firmly. "The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Prescott," I said. He chuckled. "Please," he said, "call me Theodore." He then looked at his son and daughter-in-law, who were still standing, frozen in a state of utter, silent humiliation. A new, sharp, business-like expression crossed his face. "Philip, Isabel," he said, his voice now devoid of its earlier warmth, "you and I will be having a long conversation in my study after the party is over. It seems a re-education on the core values of this family is long overdue." Standing there, between the two most powerful people I had ever met, I realized the test was over. I had passed. But for Jacob's parents, the real, grueling, and deeply uncomfortable examination of their own character had only just begun. The walk back from the rose garden to the main party was the most surreal and triumphant journey of my life. I walked between the two most powerful people in the entire Prescott clan, the legendary matriarch Vivian on one arm and the secret disguised patriarch Theodore on the other. He had wiped his hands on a silk handkerchief that his wife produced from her purse as if by magic, but he had refused to take off his muddy overalls. It was, I realized, a deliberate and powerful statement. He was not ashamed of his work, and he was not going to pretend to be anyone else, not anymore. My boyfriend, Jacob, walked beside us, his face a picture of pure, dazed, and utter joy. And trailing behind us, like two disgraced courtiers in the wake of a royal procession, were his parents, Philip and Isabel. Their faces were pale, their expressions a mixture of horror, shame, and a dawning, terrible understanding of the catastrophic social misstep they had just made. When we re-entered the main party, the shift in the atmosphere was instantaneous and absolute. The crowd which had been watching our strange procession across the lawn seemed to hold its collective breath. Vivian, with a regal and almost imperceptible gesture, guided me and Jacob to her own private central table on the main terrace. Theodore, the gardener, sat at the head of the table, a place of undeniable authority, and his wife, Vivian, sat at his right hand. She then patted the chair to her right, my chair, the seat of honor. The rest of the afternoon was a masterclass in quiet, brutal, and elegant revenge, executed not by me, but by the matriarch herself. The interrogation I had been dreading all day finally happened, but the roles were completely and totally reversed. It was my would-be in-laws who were on trial. Vivian and Theodore spent the next 2 hours talking almost exclusively to me. They ignored their own children so completely, as if they had become invisible. They asked me about my life, my work as a nurse, my passion for helping people. Theodore, I learned, was a passionate amateur botanist, and he was genuinely fascinated by my small community garden project. He asked me detailed, intelligent questions, not with the condescending air of a rich man admiring a hobby, but with the genuine curiosity of a fellow enthusiast. They made me the center of their universe. The most important and influential guests at the party, seeing where the locus of power now lay, began to drift over to our table, not to speak to Philip and Isabel, but to be introduced to me. I, the quiet, middle-class girl who was supposed to be a social pariah, was now the celebrated guest of honor at the Prescott family's most important annual event. And my in-laws had to watch. They had to sit at the far end of the table in a state of silent, agonizing humiliation and watch as the woman they had deemed unworthy was lauded by the two people whose approval they craved most in the world. Their perfect party had become the stage for their own public shaming. As Jacob and I were finally preparing to leave that evening, after hours that felt like a strange and wonderful dream, the grandparents walked us to our car. Theodore took both of my hands in his own, his skin rough and calloused from a lifetime of working in the dirt. "Nora," he said, his voice full of a genuine fatherly warmth, "you have a good heart and a strong character. You are always, always welcome in this home and in this garden." Vivian then had a quiet but firm word with her son and daughter-in-law, who had hovered nearby. "Philip, Isabel," she said, her voice like ice, "you will both apologize to this young woman for your appalling and inhospitable behavior today. She is a credit to this family, a fact you were both too blind and too snobbish to see. Do not," she said, her eyes narrowing, "make the mistake of losing her for your son." On the drive home, a comfortable, happy silence filled the car for a long time. Then Jacob reached over and took my hand. "I have never," he said, shaking his head in awe, "seen my parents so completely and totally silenced in my entire life." He looked at me, his face full of a love and a pride so profound it made my heart feel like it might burst. "They didn't see you, Nora, but my grandparents, they saw the real you, the person I fell in love with." I looked out the window at the passing landscape, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. My vindication was so much sweeter than I could have ever imagined. I hadn't won them over by faking it, by pretending to be some sophisticated version of myself. I had won by being exactly who I was. I had won by choosing kindness when it was inconvenient. I had won by not being afraid to get a little dirt on my dress. The Prescott family fortune was built on a foundation of hard work and character, a truth the younger generation had forgotten. My future with the man I loved was now secure, not because I had passed their shallow test of appearances, but because I had, without even knowing it, passed the one true test that had ever really mattered. An absolutely perfect and heartwarming story about how true character is always the most valuable asset. What did you think of the way the grandparents, Vivian and Theodore, tested their family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this amazing story of a test of character, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more wonderful stories of justice.
Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.